Hello and welcome to this introduction to blockchain games. This is a version of a talk I gave at the Digital Games Conference in Dubai on the 5th of March 2019. Okay. So who am I? My name is John Jordan. I've been in the games industry for about 20 years now. Started writing at magazines and websites like Edge and Develop and Gama Sutra, amongst others. In 2006, I co-founded a company called Steel Media, best known for the Pocket Gamer brand, so the Pocket Gamer websites and the Pocket Gamer Connects conferences. I ran pocketgamer.biz, which was the B2B website. I ran that for a number of years, and in 2018, I launched blockchaingamer.biz, so another B2B website looking at the blockchain games space. Since then, I've launched my own company, Accidental Gizmo, which is doing writing. I do a lot of presentations, various conferences around the world, which is why I was in Dubai talking about blockchain games, and also doing some consulting now for blockchain games companies as well. Okay, because this is an introduction to blockchain games, I am going to go very briefly into an introduction of blockchain. This is very top-level stuff, not much detail at all, but just so people have a rough idea of some of the basic concepts. So what is a blockchain? Well, very simply, as the name suggests, it is a chain of blocks. So what's a block? So a block, we see here a new block in kind of orange. So a block is just a way of containing data. In this case, kind of transactional data, really. Often the term distributed ledger is used, so it's a bunch of data saying who owns what in terms of these digital assets or digital currencies. Now, what's interesting, or there's many interesting things about blockchains, but one of the interesting things is the information stored in a new block has to be considered in the context of the previous blocks that have been created. So in a sense, it's a chain of blocks, but the important thing is all those blocks have to be kind of coherent and agree with each other. So when new information comes in to be stored in a block, a certain amount of information can be stored in a block. The computer systems running the blockchain have to look at the previous information stored in the previous blocks and make sure that it all agrees. Because once information is stored in a block, once a block is closed, as we say, but once the basic information is stored in a block, it's pretty much impossible to change it. In various circumstances it can be changed, but it's designed to be impossible, pretty much. So these computer systems go through what's called a consensus process, many different versions of consensus. Proof of work from Bitcoin is the best known, I suppose, but there's lots of different other ones, delegated proof of stake being a very popular one at the moment. But all that means is these computer systems come to have a process of working out whether the information stored in this block is correct, whether the block should be closed and connected to the blockchain, the chain of blocks that are there already. So that's basically what we mean by a blockchain. When we're talking about the actual kind of computer systems, the decentralized nature of a blockchain, again, different ways that this can be done. Obviously, the main comparison is with a centralized system where you have a single kind of server or single kind of node that has all the authority. Clearly that's very efficient. That's why most systems at the moment are centralized, because that's kind of the cheapest way of doing it, really, and in most cases the best way of doing it. But obviously it's a single point of failure, a single point of hacking. So there are some kind of issues around that. We can move to a kind of a more decentralized version where there are still there are more nodes here with authority. They don't have total authority, so if one goes down, potentially some of the system survives, and if one's hacked, again, potentially not all the information is lost, but it's just a different approach, really. And compared to that, we have this again, this distributed ledger system. This is kind of a classic case, we would say. Now, this is very much a Bitcoin system that all the nodes. So a node is just a computer running the software that runs a blockchain. In this case, all the nodes are all connected to each other. So when they come to consensus, all the nodes talk to all the other nodes and basically work out what's correct. This is kind of inefficient in many ways, certainly with Ethereum and Bitcoin, which are the two biggest blockchains and also run this proof of work consensus. It just means it's very slow to close a block because all these computers are all talking to each other, and that just takes time. So a lot of the newer systems either have a smaller group of computers talking to each other. So something like EOS, we might have 21 validator nodes, or they do some sort of a kind of system where all the nodes don't have to talk to all the other nodes. So you might have some sort of I guess more like this kind of decentralized system you see here, rather than all the nodes talking to each other. Every blockchain is a little bit different, so again, not into too much detail here. A couple of things to point out though is there's different types of blockchains. So in this case, we have this red one here. All the nodes are anonymous, or obviously there's different types of anonymity. So I guess we have this idea of kind of a more private blockchain, something like Monero, and some which are not anonymous or public, which is currently something like Bitcoin is a kind of would be described as a public blockchain. Also, there are private blockchains in the sense that they are run by corporations. So something like the JP Morgan coin they've just announced is not a public blockchain; it's just for their own internal use. So there's quite a lot of variations, but just to give you some idea. Again, on a high level, why would we use a blockchain? It's important to say that blockchains are not silver bullets. They solve a lot of problems, but they also create a lot of problems. So you have to be very careful kind of why we're using a blockchain. That's why we've had a lot of hype in the last couple of years about blockchains, and equally a lot of kind of a lot of negative feeling about blockchains, that they're being used in the wrong circumstances often. And often the criticism is that a blockchain is a slow database, and that's correct. In a classic sense, a blockchain is a slow database, but it's more than just a slow database. It has these other attributes, some of which are listed here, which are pretty interesting. So described already: distributed ledger. It's trustless consensus. So it's a slow database. One of the reasons it's slow is all these nodes are talking to each other to find consensus. It's interesting that it's trustless, so the computers, the nodes, don't have to trust each other. Potentially, even if there are some percentage of nodes in there that are actively trying to feed in the wrong information, the system, the blockchain, can still come to the correct consensus about what it should be kind of saving. Have this idea of immutability. Basically, once the information is stored, it can't be changed. And then we have ideas of transparency, different levels of privacy, really, and also this idea of governance, which is basically how blockchains will develop over a number of years. So some interesting stuff going on there, which means that they are more than a slow database. What can we use blockchains for? Well, pretty much anything you can think of. I mean, I'm not going to go around all this kind of selection. What's interesting, I guess, the reason I use this slide is games are not mentioned here. So there's lots of things you could think about using a blockchain for: automation, banking, finance, music, streaming, public transportation, ride sharing, real estate, media, medical records, blah, blah, blah. But games are not in here. So it's definitely not an obvious thing that games and blockchain go together very well, and in many ways they don't go together very well. But game developers, I guess, fundamentally love messing around with new bits of tech. So you generally find if there's a new bit of tech comes along, we've seen it kind of all the time. When CDs came along, or when the internet came along, or when VR came along, game developers try and make games for them. So we're kind of at that stage at the moment. Game developers are just sort of experimenting with this tech. So quickly put some numbers. So I like numbers. I like data. This is not about games at all. This is just about the kind of the overall reach of blockchain. Looking at the number of wallets out there. So obviously multiple people or individuals could own multiple wallets, and obviously do. But in terms of Bitcoin, there's 30 million wallets out there. In terms of Ethereum, 55 million wallets. Probably in the case of Ethereum, there'd be a lot more people with multiple wallets. Because Ethereum, you're using it in a slightly different way than you would be using Bitcoin, and Bitcoin's not a lot of point in having multiple wallets. And then we have these new chains, Tron and EOS. I mean, obviously there's dozens of blockchains out there, but at the moment, in terms of kind of the big key ones, it's Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then in terms of games, it's basically Ethereum, Tron and EOS, which are these blockchains where you can run what we call dApps, or decentralized apps, decentralized applications. So you can see here with Tron and EOS only launched into 2018. Pretty small in the big scheme of things. Tron's more than 1 million. EOS is last time I looked about 500,000, but just get an idea about where they are. But these are growing very fast, the bottom two. So If we look, going into a bit more detail, so we looked at just active wallets there. This is active wallets that are using dApps. So dApps is a broad category that includes games. Games isn't even the majority of this, but we can get an idea about kind of the activity that's going on here, and we'll look in a bit more detail about what kind of dApps are being used. So in blue we have Ethereum, started the year 2018 over 200,000, ended the year under 100,000. Obviously we've had a collapse in the price of Ethereum over that time, down 85% in dollar terms. So not surprised potentially to see a decline, but it's still, that's 100. That's not whatever that is, 75,000. And we see here this kind of big increase in EOS. So EOS is now 150,000 wallets. Probably most of these are not multiple users because EOS is a bit of a pain to set up wallets on at the moment, at least. And then we have Tron here again, about 75,000. So we can see here kind of Ethereum going down and these other two ones coming up. This is again in terms of these active wallets that are actually using these applications. So just going to say it's a pretty small subset of the wider blockchain space, this dApp kind of ecosystem. So this is a slide I use a lot. We'll come back to it. I don't necessarily agree with all of it, but it's interesting to think about blockchain games and what it actually means. So Alex Van der Sand did this, tweeted out April 2018. He's an Ethereum guy. What does he want from blockchain games? So a good game first, whatever that means. I guess he means it's not necessarily about the blockchain first, it's about the game. There's got to be some interesting game experience. Yep, fine. Explore what makes a blockchain unique. This is important. Blockchains are very limiting. As we'll see here, designed around the limitations, but blockchains are unique. There's really good things you can do with blockchain that's impossible or at least very hard to do without a blockchain. So why are you making a game on a blockchain? What are you using the blockchain for? And limitations, how can you get around these? The world is persistent and always on. Well, this kind of depends a little bit on whether it's a blockchain game or a game using the blockchain. But some element, the blockchain is always on effectively. So it's to some degree you don't necessarily have this, but the items potentially are always available. And if you were making a game using a blockchain in a deep manner, you would definitely have this. So the players own the game, the items, the experiences. This is very important when combined, particularly with blockchain games. By definition, allow anyone to design and improve the game. So we've had this with mods in the past. But that's much more limited compared to what we see in blockchain, where things can be forked, basically take the code and make something totally different from it without anyone's permission. And we'll go into a bit more detail about how games are being not really modded, but being used as platforms or game items at least. So multiple games are being made using the same items without the permission of the developer. And player ownership is a massive thing. So that's probably the key thing we would have in blockchain games. Not really going to talk about bots in this talk, but any activity that can create financial incentives, and obviously blockchains can, because you have this idea of tokens which can be cashed out for fiat currency. It's going to be botted, so you're going to have bots in blockchain, and we do have a lot of bots in blockchain games already. So think about a way. Embracing them is obviously kind of making the positive of having them in there. That can be quite hard, but at least think about if people are going to bot your game, how's that going to impact the game. Here's another way of thinking about blockchain. I really like this one. I really think community is a big thing, not at the moment, but the next 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, using blockchains to build community is going to be massive. So this is a guy, Nicholas Pouillard, who is the blockchain initiative manager at Ubisoft. Ubisoft, one of the big, what we'll now call traditional game publishers. And of those, it's the only one that's actively and publicly talking about its blockchain initiatives. Pretty small team, less than 10 people. They did this prototype of a game called Hashcraft. It's an internal prototype. It's pretty interesting, actually. If you're playing this game, you're running an actual node. It is its own blockchain. So it is a blockchain game. The game is running on the blockchain. Everything that happens in the game is happening on a blockchain, which is, different ways of doing it. It's interesting. But what they were looking to do is they weren't trying to do item sales. They weren't trying to do tokens, NFTs, any of that kind of stuff. They were thinking about how you build a game and how you then build a community through interacting with that. And I think that's pretty powerful. So blockchains will always create financial incentives, but it's the better way of thinking about financial incentives is, can you build community? So can you have your token accumulating value in financial and non-financial terms? I think this is going to be important, not so much for 2019, but 2020 and onwards. So let's quickly go through some ideas of blockchain games to date and see what they got right and what they got wrong. First one, 2014 Hunter Coin. So this is Hunter Coin, still going, a blockchain game based on the Namecoin blockchain, which is basically Bitcoin really. So a very traditional sort of decentralized full node proof of work kind of scenario. And what's interesting about this is it wasn't made by game developers, it was made by crypto enthusiasts, although some of the guys who are involved in this have gone on to develop a blockchain game platform called Zaya. But this is very traditional. It wasn't supposed to be a very kind of important game or anything. It's supposed to be just an experiment. Can we create a blockchain based game where we're not running the servers as developers? Just generally people are just running the servers, running the nodes because they like the game or there's some financial reason to do it. So top-down game. When a block is closed, so it's a typical mining scenario when a block is closed, mined, whatever. The person who mines the block, closes the block, gets rewarded in these Hunter coins that can be sold out for fiat currency, just like a Bitcoin. And also some of these Hunter coins are thrown onto the map. And this is little characters here. You can see that you can move them around it's like turn-based, depending on how the block closes. So kind of limited in a way, but you move these characters around, you fight other characters, and you collect these coins. So it's worked pretty well in the sense it came out in 2014, still going. Not a lot of people playing it at the moment. It was basically particularly when you could make a lot of money playing this game, like tens of thousands of dollars a day. Just got massively botted, so you just had people playing bots because it's very simple gameplay. But it's still going. So from that point of view, it gives some kind of example of what can be done. 2017, Spells of Genesis. So this is a mobile game. As happens with most blockchain mobile games, partly for design reasons and partly for App Store rule reasons. This is the gameplay. So it's a card collection and leveling up game. So there's 4 cards here, and then there's the gameplay is this kind of physics bouncing around kind of trajectory game, and you have these cards that you level up, and when you level them up to a certain level, you can put them on the blockchain. The blockchain stuff happens all pretty much outside the game. So this is a companion app called the Book of Orbs, which actually supports more than Spells of Genesis, but these are Spells of Genesis cards. So as you'd expect with a blockchain item-based economy, you can buy these cards for bit crystal, and then you can import them back into the game, into your mobile game. Obviously, the more powerful cards. Some people can maybe don't play the game and just trade them. But you can see here it says no buyers, no sellers. The big problem with this game was there wasn't really a lot of players, certainly on the blockchain side of things. Partly because the integration couldn't really be done very well in terms of Apple and Google, what they allow you to do in terms of bringing in or in terms of financial transactions going on outside their ecosystem. So it's quite hard to do on mobile. So again, a kind of an interesting first experiment, but the game, I quite like the game. I played it a lot, but the blockchain elements were really, I think, quite hidden for a lot of players. Which brings us to CryptoKitties. So still arguments going about whether this is a game or not. I'm certainly firmly of the opinion it is a game. It's just a very lightweight, a very kind of light game in terms of what you can actually do. But we'll go into see why this is actually still the best example of a blockchain game, and I would say the best blockchain game out there still. So it came out late 2017, just when all the crypto prices were booming. So that's one of the reasons it got very successful. Again, wasn't made by a game development company. Came out of a kind of a design studio out of Vancouver. So approaching blockchain games in a different way, and really not really approaching games really. I mean, you could argue some people actually see this as much more collectible, and it is the basic mechanic here is collection. So these are my CryptoKitties. Not particularly impressive. So like everyone else, when I started out, I just bought really rubbish ones, and then when you breed rubbish ones together, you tend to get rubbish ones out again. Over the years, I've got a bit more extravagant. So I've got my Gen 0 one, only 50,000 of those ever. I think they've all sold out now. And then this one here has a little attribute. You can see here this little gem. So different levels of value. Generally, it's kind of the value is hard to judge really for someone like me who doesn't play it a lot, but it's the generation. The lower the number, the better, and also the kind of the DNA attributes of a CryptoKitty give it value as well. So basically what can you do in it? Well, very little. But let's have a look at how I created. Which one was it? This one. So I think somewhat surprised. You can name them all. Obviously, that's why they've got silly names. So how did I create Somewhat Surprised? So I took these 2 CryptoKitties that I happen to own. You can also breed with ones that you don't own, which you then pay more for. And the player who is lending you their CryptoKitty gains that money. So anyway, we had these 2. So we had Generation 9, rubbish one, Generation 3, slightly better. The resulting is CryptoKitty is always 1 plus the highest number. So you've got a Gen 10 here. In terms of actually how it works in terms of the blockchain, all these are unique items that are saved onto the Ethereum blockchain. And to do that, you, in this case, interact with a program called MetaMask, which is a browser extension. And we can see here we're connected to the main Ethereum network. We can see here it's going to cost me $1.78 to do this breeding, which the developer called ActionZen, that's the developer of CryptoKitties, that's what they get. And then I have a gas fee. So the way Ethereum works is I have to spend a bit of money to tell the blockchain that this is an important transaction that I want to get stored in a block, and that money goes to the companies who are running the Ethereum blockchain. So we can see here the price here, $1.83 to create another not very good CryptoKitties. Although this price, I'm trying to think when I did this quite a long time ago, so the price of Ethereum was much higher then. So what's interesting here with CryptoKitties is the only thing you can do with them is you can breed them, or you can give them away, or you can trade them, buy and sell them. So very little things you can, not very much you can do, and what might be seen as not very interesting as a game. But let's go back to Alex van der Sant. What did he say? Explore what makes a blockchain unique. So what makes a blockchain unique? The fact I can own items, I can prove I own those items, I can prove I own those CryptoKitties because I'm the only one who can interact with them on the blockchain, because I'm the only one who has access to my MetaMask account, which is basically how I prove I have ownership, because that's how I interact with the blockchain. So impossible really to do that in a centralized way. Maybe not impossible, but pretty hard to do. And obviously at that point becomes, there's a lot of financial value caught up in a centralized system. So for using Ethereum, you get all this for free. And CryptoKitty designed around the limitations that Ethereum is quite a slow blockchain, and it takes time to close a block. And until a block is closed, you don't know what's happened. And it designed around it because you can't do very much. There's no fast-paced gameplay. In CryptoKitties, you can basically breed them, so the outcome there is I wonder what I'm going to get, or you can sell them, so the outcome is have I bought it or haven't I bought it. There's not like, oh, I'm going to take a shot, oh I missed, I need to take another shot. It doesn't do it perfectly, but I think the problem with most blockchain games now that have come since CryptoKitties is they make the gameplay much more complex, so they're hit much more by the limitations, and they are not so focused on the uniqueness. So that's why I really like CryptoKitties. There's going to be more. Okay. So the Kittyverse. What is the Kittyverse? So as we say, CryptoKitties is a very basic game, but it's very popular. So I think the last figures I saw is 1.5 million CryptoKitties have been bred, most of them by the community, and there's about 70,000 people own a CryptoKitty, although most of those are not active players of the game. But what's happened is, because that's still the biggest blockchain game in terms of a kind of a user base, other developers have basically said, oh, we can use the fact that people own CryptoKitties and make games for them. So that might be someone who has a totally different game and makes a mini game using CryptoKitties. It may be someone who just wants to make a mini game purely for CryptoKitties. And this started happening informally, because with blockchain you can do that, and any blockchain game using MetaMask, when it looks at MetaMask, it can see what any player owns, because MetaMask is the way in which you prove you have ownership of these items on Ethereum. So you started to see kind of these games springing up without the permission of ActionZen, the developers of CryptoKitties. Because they're quite smart people, they kind of realised that it would be more sensible to embrace this. So they opened up an API, and they have this thing, the Kittyverse, which is more like a formal marketing process where they can push their kind of player base towards these other mini games. And to be fair, I mean, there's over 40 of these now. Most of them are not good. Most of them are pretty limited, and to me don't really add much to the kind kind of elegant beauty of CryptoKitties. But we have this one. Kitty Hats was the first one where you bought hats for your kitties, so not very much at all, but an aesthetic thing. Obviously, you have racing. And I think with Kitty Race, you can actually gamble on which one's the fastest. You have kitty battles, of course. I mean, loads of different things. But what's interesting is everyone adds what we might call utility. Not a great term, really, I suppose. But with these 40 games in development, most of them are not live actually yet. You just gain a bit more of things you can do with the CryptoKitties that the developer didn't have to do. So it's kind of a platform, an ecosystem, whatever term you want to use, and that's really interesting because it's happened. It emerged. It was an emergent property. I guess a recent example was Gods Unchained, a very big forthcoming blockchain game, a card collection battler game with strong esports elements, raised $6 million last year. They did a mashup with CryptoKitties. So this is my Gen 0 Chop Top. Here he is as a CryptoKitty, and in the middle there you can see him. Here he is as a statue within the Gods Unchained world. So I think they could have done a bit better, really, than this, because basically all that you've got here is this statue is the same for all the CryptoKitties, and you do have different colouring. So it's just taken the DNA of the colouring and the patterns and done it in there, which is a pretty lightweight way of doing it. But anyway, it's kind of worked. I spent whatever it was, $15, doing this, taking my CryptoKitty into Gods Unchained. So interoperability, horrible lumpy word. Not seen many good examples of that yet, but that's the potential of blockchain games. Another thing, just mention it because I think it's kind of cool. So this is from the CryptoKitties website. What can I do with my CryptoKitty? There was a kind of a disagreement, an argument maybe 6 months ago about with CryptoKitties, did you own the kitty or did you own the artwork? And there was an idea that you just own the base data on the blockchain. You didn't own the artwork. If the centralized server that ran the artwork was switched off, then you wouldn't have artwork. So Action Zen kind of formalized this. They have this thing called the NFT license now, so you can use the art for your own personal commercial use. The thing I love at the bottom here is you can use the art to commercialize your own merchandising, providing you aren't earning more than $100,000 in revenue each year. So basically, with my Chop Top, I could sell T-shirts and bedspreads and whatever, put them in a movie, and that would all be fine as long as I wasn't earning more than $100,000 a year. So this is something that's not really, it's kind of not inherent in the blockchain, but it's kind of like in the spirit of the blockchain, and this is now something that is kind of reflected in CryptoKitties. And this brings us back again to Alex van der Sand. So the players own the game, the items and the experiences, and the developer in this case has kind of underlined that, and anyone can design and improve the game by this kind of Kittyverse thing. So we're kind of starting to see, at a very low level, some of these things that we want from blockchain games being reflected in actual live products. Okay, look more some numbers. So this is from Non-Fungible, which is our kind of data website about non-fungible tokens, NFTs, however you want to call them. So this is 2018. This is the weekly active wallets on Ethereum. So slightly different numbers from what we've seen before. Every data source is slightly different, but so for these guys, they started off at just under, I don't know, it's like 9,000, and ended the year about 9,000. But what you see is every different colour is a different game. So we started the year with lots of CryptoKitties. CryptoKitties is still pretty big here, this blue, but now we see lots of other kind of games launching. See some peaks, some kind of fads coming in. Ethergoo came in big for a couple of months and just died away again. And Gods Unchained is in here in green at the bottom. So we can just see, there's not massive growth in terms of the number of people playing this, but there's kind of quite big growth in terms of the number of games available. And if we look at the transaction volumes, so this is the number of transactions in the game. Again, kind of slight uptick as the year goes on. Again, we see much more strongly here. CryptoKitties is by far and away the biggest kind of game in terms of the kind of activity going on in terms of people actually interacting with the blockchain. Let me see again some weird peaks. Ethergoo came and went very quickly. ETHtown as well. And if we chop the whole year up, again, we have this idea. It's about $200 million, just over $200 million of value, but obviously this is transactional value, so this is potentially people buying and selling items multiple times. That's very different to a normal game where Activision puts out a game and you spend $60 on it, and Activision gets all that money. In this kind of space, CryptoKitties maybe like $47 million. A certain percentage of that, don't know how much, maybe half, maybe a third, didn't go to Action Zen, went to people buying and selling CryptoKitties. Probably some people, not very many, but some people, had a nice side project, buying CryptoKitties, breeding them, and selling them on again. This is kind of interesting because this is what blockchain is doing in terms of opening up the kind of it's opening up the kind of game and allowing developers to make games based on other developers' games, but it's also allowing the community not necessarily to make money, but to be part of the marketplace and part of the economy. But the headline here is very small numbers. $200 million is just so tiny, and most of it came to CryptoKitties. Decentraland, interesting project going live in terms of consumer facing liveness, middle of 2019. ETH really nice game. Spiked up in the middle of the year and then kind of collapsed again. But we're very early in this space, so it's not a surprise to see these kind of things. But most of these games down here are just like doing very small sums of money. Look at some other chains. So this previously up to this point we're talking all about Ethereum because that's by far and away where the bulk of activity is happening. EOS, so we mentioned this new blockchain EOS. Doesn't have a lot of gaming on it, but has one very important game, EOS Night, so a mobile game from two guys out of South Korea. We can see here some numbers. This is from DApp Radar. So this is the gaming DApp activity on EOS, this other blockchain. So we can see again how the year, EOS launches in the summer, so that's why we don't have anything before then. And very quickly we see this kind of big uptake. So this is 10,000 active wallets and just over, what's that, 6,000 people actually paying. So you can have activity that doesn't involve paying. But pretty much all this is EOS Nights. So EOS Nights is growing pretty quickly. And EOS is a different blockchain to Ethereum, so it's difficult to compare like for like. But if you did, EOS Nights would be the most popular game in terms of active kind of players at the moment. And yeah, we've mentioned this before. So if we look at what's happening on these blockchains, so we have Ethereum in blue. So 25% is games and marketplaces, 25% is gambling and high risk kind of gambling type stuff. And the majority still is exchanges, so it's people buying and selling ERC20 tokens. If we look at EOS and Tron, because these are much newer chains, they're different designs, so you can do much more fast-paced stuff, but they've only just started out. So the vast majority of activity on these things is gambling and high risk. Now, presumably, what we expect is over time this will drop right down, maybe higher than Ethereum because they're faster blockchains, so you may have a bit more. But we basically expect to see these go down and marketplaces and exchanges go up. Probably game exchanges are harder to do because it just happened that Ethereum was in the right place, right time for ICOs. But we'd expect kind of. Well, it'll be interesting to see, I suppose. We shouldn't say expect, but interesting to see how this changes for EOS and Tron over 2019. But at the moment, games we can still see, dApps is not a big category, and games are not a big part of dApps. So we shouldn't get totally carried away. The mobile games are coming to blockchain games are coming to take over the world. Some interesting strategic moves though. So Tron, this new blockchain, has this fund, $100 million US dollars to be spent over 3 years, encouraging game developers to use Tron. Okay, let's finish off by looking at some blockchain games that are coming out on our most anticipated list, which could shake things up quite a lot. So Major League Baseball, Crypto Baseball. This game actually came out in September last year, but it's linked to the obviously the US MLB League, which runs from March to the end of September. So didn't really have a very long kind of run in terms of what it was trying to do. It's kind of a collectible sort of game, a bit of CryptoKitties, but also has real life fantasy stuff. So these are real life players, these are real likenesses. It has it's proper teams. It's all kind of properly licensed. So you can buy these baseball players, put them in your team, and then kind of set up what you think they're going to do in the real games that are happening in the real world. So it's kind of has this fantasy sports thing, and then you're rewarded on the basis of your team winning or your team getting strikes, or depending on what you choose to happen. So it'll be interesting because there is obviously a very strong stat heavy audience within the kind of baseball fraternity. The problem they had last year was it was a very traditional kind of MetaMask browser game. You needed to have Ether in order to do anything in the game. So this year they kind of changed the onboarding to make it more accessible to people. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. this year. It's a multi-year license, so so they've got a number of years, number of chances to kind of build that audience. Blanco's Block Party. So this is a game from guys who came out of Activision and Blizzard, well funded at $16 million of funding. They've got a couple of games actually coming out, but only one this year, I think. Blancos, and it's kind of like it's not been formally announced yet, but kind of a mini game type thing with some nice customization. But the main thing is these kind of crazy characters. And obviously, this is playing up to item ownership. So, item ownership is, you know, we've seen with CryptoKitties, is the major thing for the blockchain. You can prove that you own items. You can sell them and kind of trade them, and some level of customization. A lot of brands involved in this. So lots of expectation actually for this game, because it's very light in terms of the blockchain. You can play this game without interacting with the blockchain. It's running on the EOS. Blockchain, but you don't need like a wallet, you don't need EOS to play it. So it'll be very interesting to see. This is very mass market. First really kind of AAA production quality game with blockchain elements. Probably not coming out, I don't think, till the autumn, till the fall, but there's going to be a lot of hype around this game. And this is a quote I really like. So this is John Linden, is the CEO of Mythical Games, and his view, you know, why will blockchain games matter? And he says gamers want a bigger stake in their games. Blockchain items give them ownership. This guy's worked on, you know, he's worked on Call of Duty, he's worked on Skylanders, he's worked on some pretty big products. So he's not asking people to log in through MetaMask. You know, he knows that's not going to happen. But what he's thinking about is kind of the passion of gamers. What do they want? Ownership is going to be massive. Interesting how quickly this happens, but this was announced in November last year. So this was Plague Hunters. Kind of pretty low-key indie game actually, but it was, you know, looks like it's coming to PlayStation 4. Actually looks like it could come to PlayStation 4, Switch, and PC. Although all that stuff's not exactly confirmed yet, but it is running on that hardware, and they seem to have be in talks with Sony to get this game actually out. So probably not happening this year in terms of console adoption, but blockchain games or games running on a blockchain will come to consoles probably 2020. Obviously, that's going to be pretty big. Gods Unchained, I mentioned this game before, so this is a Hearthstone type experience. They raised $6 million from crowd funding, effectively selling their cards and selling tickets to their esports tournament. This is going live in the summer of 2019 from an Australian developer called Fuel Brothers. That's what it looks like. This is the one where I have my CryptoKitty as a statue on the deck, or not on the deck, on the playing surface. We have the Sandbox. So the Sandbox is a pretty well-known mobile free-to-play game. 40 million downloads of its Pixel 2D version. This is a proper 3D voxel version for PC. I think for mobile as well. This is what a sandbox might look like. So it's a small area in which you can make games, place items. So obviously the Roblox kind of Minecraft sort of user-generated content side of things. We'll have a voxel editor, so you can create items and animate them, and obviously block them into your sandbox. Also, clearly, blockchain elements here has a marketplace where you can make items and sell them. Has its own currency. It's quite interesting stuff it's doing. This is coming out at the end of 2019. It's quite a complex project, so we'll see how that one goes. And then Reality Clash as well. So this is a game just in testing at the moment. Mobile-based location VR AR shooter. As we mentioned with Spells of Genesis, big issue here is getting around Google and Apple. Not getting around, but staying within Google and Apple terms. So has this item, this armory, which is web-based. So you can buy these items with its own currency. So there we go. Quick run through what's going on in blockchain games. Very early, loads of promise. No one, it's going to happen, just no one quite knows when. If anyone wants to get hold of me, various things, various ways of getting hold of me. But thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to subscribe, and hope you come back soon.